Welcome back to the deep dive. Okay, I want you to close your eyes for just a second. Imagine a king, but not just any king. I want you to picture the archetype, the sort of storybook king. He's on a golden throne, there are silk curtains everywhere, and the air, it smells like frankincense.
You're painting quite the picture. It feels very theatrical.
Right, and he's listening to a woman tell stories about, genies, flying carpets, secret caves, just overflowing with treasure.
So you're talking about Harun al-Rashid.
Yeah.
But you're talking about the legend of Harun al-Rashid.
Exactly. I'm talking about the Caliph from 1001 Nights, what we call the Arabian Nights, the guy listening to Scheherazade, the ruler of this magical, almost mythical Baghdad.
Right.
But today, that's not what we're doing. We are taking that storybook, putting it right back on the shelf, and instead we're pulling down the actual dusty historical chronicles.
And that, I think, is where things get so much more interesting, because when you strip away the magic lamps and all the flying carpets, the man you find underneath, the historical Harun al-Rashid, is infinitely more complex.
And more powerful.
Oh, way more powerful. And frankly, a lot more terrifying than the character you read about in the fairy tales.
And that is really the mission of this deep dive. We've got a huge stack of sources here. We're looking at historical records from al-Tabari, anecdotes from al-Masudi, modern analysis on Abbasid diplomacy, and we're just going to explore the reality of his reign.
Which was from 786 to 809.
The absolute peak of the Islamic Golden Age.
It really was the peak. I mean, we have to set the stage here, because Baghdad in the late 8th century, it wasn't just a city. It was the city. It was the center of gravity for the whole world.
Intellectually, culturally.
Financially, yeah. If you were a scientist, if you were a poet, if you were a merchant with ambition, Baghdad was the only place you wanted to be. And sitting right on top of this massive spinning world was Harun.
And he has one of the coolest epithets in history, al-Rashid.
It's a great one. It translates to the just, or the upright, or sometimes the rightly guided.
That's a heavy title.
It is. It implies this sort of moral clarity, like he has a divine sanction to rule. But as we're going to see, being the just definitely didn't mean he was soft.
Not at all.
I mean, this is a story about incredible court luxury, yes, but it's also about really high-stakes international diplomacy. He's dealing with figures like Charlemagne.
And there's a family drama at the heart of it that is so toxic it eventually just tears the empire in half.
It's a true political thriller.
It's basically Succession meets Game of Thrones, but with, way better architecture.
That is actually a surprisingly accurate description. I like that.
So let's start at the very beginning. Every legend has an origin story. Where does Harun come from?
He was born in Ray, which is in modern-day Iran, near Tehran. His father was the Caliph al-Mahdi, so obviously that gave him a bit of a head start in life.
Just a bit.
But if you really want to understand Harun, you have to look at the woman standing right behind him, his mother, Al-Khayzuran.
I saw her name all over our notes. She seems like a complete powerhouse.
Powerhouse is an understatement. I mean, she is one of the most formidable women in all of Islamic history. She started her life as a slave from Yemen.
Wow.
But she possessed such intelligence, such charisma, that she rose to become the queen mother. And she did not just sit in the harem, eating grapes.
No.
She was an active political player. She was influencing state affairs. She was managing alliances. Harun's early life was absolutely shaped by her ambition just as much as by his father's title.
So he's born into this really high-pressure, high-power environment. What was his training like? I'm guessing he went to a pretty good school.
The best that money could possibly buy. I mean, his education was basically designed to build the perfect ruler. It was the prince's curriculum turned up to 11.
Right.
He studied history, geography, because you can't rule an empire if you don't know where the borders are or what happened before you got there.
Yeah.
He also studied rhetoric, music, and poetry.
Okay, why music and poetry? That feels a little bit liberal arts for a medieval emperor.
Well, you have to remember the context. The Abbasid court was a place of extremely high culture. The Caliph was expected to be a patron of the arts, but also a critic.
Ah, so he had to have taste.
Exactly. He had to be able to appreciate a complex meter in a poem or a subtle key change in a piece of music. It was a display of refinement, of sophistication.
But it wasn't just, arts and craft.
Oh, no. There's a massive religious component. He mastered the Quran, the Hadith, which are the traditions and sayings of the Prophet Muhammad and Islamic law. As Caliph, he would be the Amir al-Mu'minin, the commander of the faithful.
So he had to be a scholar.
He needed to be a religious scholar in his own right to have that legitimacy. And then, of course, there's the physical side. Our notes describe him as a mujahid.
A holy warrior.
Right. He trained in swordplay, archery, horsemanship, the art of war. He was physically imposing, tall, slim, but very strong. And they didn't just keep him in the classroom. He was out in the field very, very early.
Yeah, this part of the research blew my mind. Before he was even the Caliph, while he was basically still a teenager, he was leading these huge campaigns against the Eastern Roman Empire.
Byzantines.
Yeah.
Nominally leading them, of course. I mean, he had seasoned generals with him. But in 780 and again in 782, he was the face of these massive expeditions against Empress Irene of Byzantium.
Yeah.
And the scale, it's just hard to wrap your head around the logistics of it.
There's this one specific detail in Al-Tabari's history that I just have to unpack. He mentions that after one of these campaigns, Harun's army came back with so much loot that they needed 20,000 mules just to carry the riches.
20,000 mules. Just try to imagine that caravan. I mean, it would stretch for miles and miles. The noise, the dust, the sheer biological reality of that many animals.
And the economic impact when that caravan gets back to Baghdad? It's fascinating. It wasn't just, hooray, we're rich now. It actually crashed the market.
It was a deflationary shock, a huge one. Al-Tabari records that the price of a good sword dropped to a single dirham.
And a horse.
A horse fell to 1 gold dinar.
So they just flooded the market with so much military hardware and livestock that the value completely plummeted.
Exactly. It's basic supply and demand. Suddenly, every other person could afford a war horse. But for Harun, this was a massive PR coup. It proved he had baraka, a kind of divine blessing.
Made him a hero.
To the army, to the people, absolutely. His father, the Caliph al-Mahdi, saw this potential and promoted him. He made him second in line to the throne and gave him governance over the entire western half of the empire.
Which is huge.
Everything from Syria all the way to Azerbaijan.
But second in line is, it's a dangerous place to be. His father dies in 785. Harun's older brother, Al-Hadi, becomes the new caliph. And almost immediately, the whole vibe just shifts.
This is the succession crisis. Al-Hadi only reigns for about a year and 2 months, but it was a year of extreme tension. And interestingly, the main conflict wasn't actually Harun versus Al-Hadi. Not at first.
Who was it?
It was Al-Hadi versus their mother, Khayzuran.
Because she wouldn't let go of the reins of power.
Precisely. I mean, she was used to being the power behind the throne.
Yeah.
Ministers, generals, they would go to her apartments to get their orders. Al-Hadi wanted to be his own man.
Right.
So he essentially tried to put his own mother under house arrest. He forbade her from meeting with any state officials. He was trying to completely erase her influence.
And in the Abbasid court, when you try to erase someone's influence, usually someone ends up dead.
And in this case, it was the Caliph himself. Al-Hadi dies under very mysterious circumstances.
The history books often just say abdominal ulcer.
Which is usually historian code for, we don't really know, but it looked painful.
Or something else.
Other sources are much more blunt. They suggest it was an assassination, possibly carried out by slave girls, suffocating him with pillows.
On whose orders?
On the orders of his own mother. We'll never know for sure, of course.
Yeah.
But the timing was incredibly convenient for Harun.
Which brings us to what's called the Night of Accession. If you were writing this as a screenplay, I feel like the producers would tell you to tone it down.
Yeah, it's too much.
It's too much happening at once.
It really is a scripted moment in history. It's a single night where the fate of the world pivots. It's the night Al-Hadi dies. It's the night Harun becomes caliph. But that's not all.
No.
It's also the night his son, Al-Ma'mun, is born.
And his other important son, Al-Amin, is born just a short time later to his primary wife, Zubaydah.
It's this unbelievable convergence of death, birth, and power. But the transition wasn't automatic. Just because your brother died doesn't mean you're safe. Khayzuran knew this.
And she had an ally.
Yes, Yahya ibn Khalid. You have to remember that name. He's crucial to this story. He was Harun's tutor, and he was actually in prison at the time.
Al-Hadi locked him up.
Yes, because he was Harun's biggest supporter. So on this completely chaotic night, Khayzuran has Yahya broken out of jail. She tells him, take the money, pay the army everything they're owed immediately, and get the commanders to swear allegiance to Harun right now.
It's a classic move. Cash for loyalty, and you execute it before the sun comes up.
Speed was everything. They even went to Al-Hadi's own young son, a boy named Jafar, dragged the poor kid out of his bed.
In the middle of the night.
And forced him to publicly renounce any claim he had to the throne.
That is a rough wake-up call. Good morning, son. Your dad is dead. You're not the king. Now go back to sleep.
It's brutal, but it ensured stability. By morning, Harun was the undisputed commander of the faithful. He was in his early 20s, incredibly wealthy, battle-tested, and now the absolute ruler of the entire Islamic world.
So the Golden Age has officially begun. But Harun is smart. He knows he can't run this whole machine by himself. He needs to bring in the professionals.
He brings in the Barmakids.
We mentioned Yahya, the guy who broke out of jail. But this family, they have such a fascinating backstory.
They really do. They were an Iranian family originally from a city called Balkh, which is in modern-day Afghanistan.
Right.
But here's the real kicker. Their ancestors weren't even Muslims.
Right, they were Buddhist priests.
Hereditary Buddhist priests at a very famous monastery.
That is just a wild career pivot. From Buddhist priests in Afghanistan to basically running the entire Islamic Caliphate from Baghdad.
It really highlights the cosmopolitan nature of the Abbasid Empire. I mean, this wasn't just an Arab ethno-state. It was a multi-ethnic, multicultural empire that was brilliant at absorbing the administrative genius of other cultures, especially the Persians.
So Harun makes Yahya his Grand Vizier.
He does. He gives him his own signet ring. He effectively says to him, you run the government, I'll handle the big picture stuff.
And for 17 years, that's exactly what happened. Yahya and his sons, Jafar, Fadl, Musa, they were the government.
They were the administration. They appointed the governors, they managed the tax collection, they oversaw the judiciary, but they were also the great patrons of the intellect. This is the era that gives us the Bayt al-Hikma.
The House of Wisdom. Let's spend a moment on that. Because we hear House of Wisdom, and I think we picture like a nice public library. But it was so much more than that, wasn't it?
So much more. It was a state-sponsored research institute, a translation center, a university, all rolled into one. The Barmakids and Harun sent agents across the entire known world with bags of gold.
To do what?
To buy books. Greek manuscripts on philosophy and medicine, Persian histories, Indian mathematical texts, and then they brought them back to Baghdad and paid the best scholars alive to translate them all into Arabic.
This is such a crucial point in human history. I mean, while Western Europe was still struggling with basic literacy in many places,
Baghdad was debating Aristotle and Euclid.
they were preserving all the knowledge of the ancients.
Preserving it, yes, but also synthesizing it and building on it. This is where Indian numerals, the numbers we use today, met Greek geometry to create algebra. It was an intellectual pressure cooker, and the Barmakids were the ones keeping the fire lit.
And speaking of pressure, at some point, Harun decides that Baghdad itself is a little too hot for him, politically or maybe strategically. In 796, he moves the entire court.
He moves to Raqqa.
In modern-day Syria. Why? Why would you leave Baghdad? It's the greatest city on earth.
It seems to have been a very strategic decision. Raqqa is on the Euphrates River, much further west. It put Harun closer to the Byzantine border.
Ah.
We have to remember, he always identified as a warrior king, a mujahid. He wanted to be within striking distance of the front lines. Raqqa gave him a perfect command post.
Good communication lines.
Exactly, via the river.
Yeah.
And it had rich agriculture to feed the army, and it was a better position to monitor any potential rebellions in Syria. He ended up ruling the world from Raqqa for 12 years.
So we have this perfect system, it seems. The Barmakids are running the administration from Baghdad. Harun is in Raqqa leading the military. It sounds great.
Until it isn't?
Yeah. The fall of the Barmakids is one of those historical events that just reads like a mob hit.
It really does. It happened around the year 803. It was sudden, it was absolute, and it was bloody. One day, the Barmakids are the second most powerful family in the world.
And the next.
The next day, Yahya is in prison, all his property is confiscated, and his son Jafar, who was Harun's best friend, his constant companion, is executed, and his body is put on display.
But why? I mean, if the system was working so well, why would you burn it all down?
Historians have been arguing about this for 1,200 years. There's no single clear answer. Al-Tabari lists a few possibilities. One is personal.
Hubris.
Exactly. They got too comfortable. There are stories of Jafar entering the caliph's court unannounced, treating Harun like a buddy rather than his sovereign.
You don't bro out with the commander of the faithful.
You do not. Then there's the political angle. They were making huge state decisions without even consulting Harun. There's a famous story about Yahya releasing a very important prisoner that Harun had specifically ordered to be kept in jail.
That's a direct challenge to his authority.
A huge one. It's like they'd become a state within a state.
And Harun had to put a stop to it.
I think so. For all his culture and love of poetry, Harun was an autocrat. He felt his authority was being overshadowed, maybe even mocked. The destruction of the Barmakids was a brutal, terrifying reminder to the world, and especially to his own court, that he was the source of all power.
It's a chilling lesson that in an absolute monarchy, you are only safe as long as the monarch likes you.
Absolutely.
But Harun didn't just project power internally. We need to talk about his global footprint. Because when you look at the map from that time, he's dealing with some really heavy hitters.
The heaviest.
Let's talk about Charlemagne.
The king of the Franks. Later, the Holy Roman Emperor in the West.
Harun and Charlemagne. It sounds like a crossover episode that just shouldn't exist, but they had a surprisingly warm relationship.
They did. They never met in person, of course. The travel was just too difficult and dangerous. But they exchanged multiple embassies, multiple groups of envoys, and the logic behind their friendship was pure, the enemy of my enemy is my friend.
And who was the common enemy?
Well, there were two of them, really. First, the Umayyad dynasty in Spain. They were the survivors of the dynasty the Abbasids had overthrown, and they were a major thorn in Charlemagne's side, too.
And the second?
The Byzantines in Constantinople. Both Harun and Charlemagne had major beef with the Byzantine emperor, so they were natural allies in this grand geopolitical pincer movement.
And this diplomacy involved gifts. Gifts that just put modern state dinners to shame.
Oh, completely.
Charlemagne said some pretty practical stuff, right? Spanish horses, high-quality Frisian wool cloaks, hunting dogs.
Very European, very martial. Here are some things to help you hunt and fight better.
But Harun decided to show off.
He flexed hard. He sent back silks, perfumes, balsam, these incredible ivory chessmen, a colossal tent with multicolored curtains. But the real showstoppers were the elephant and the clock.
We have to talk about the elephant.
His name was Abul Abbas. He was an Asian elephant. Just imagine for a second the logistics of walking an elephant from Baghdad, across North Africa, probably by boat across the Mediterranean, and then over the Alps to Aachen in modern Germany.
That's an insane journey.
It arrived in 802. It was a sensation. I mean, for people who had maybe only seen pictures of them in books, it was a living, breathing monster from the East.
And then there was the clock. This wasn't just a sundial.
No, this was an incredibly complex brass water clock. It marked the hours by dropping little bronze balls into a bowl, which would create a chime. But the visual part was the real kicker.
The knights.
It had 12 little doors. At 1 o'clock, one little mechanical knight on horseback would ride out of a door. At 2 o'clock, 2 knights would emerge.
That is steampunk-level technology for the year 800.
It absolutely was. Charlemagne's courtiers were terrified of it. I mean, some of them genuinely thought it was sorcery, a demonic conjuration.
It was a power move.
It was the ultimate power move. It was Harun's way of saying, I'm not just richer and more powerful than you. My civilization understands the mechanics of the universe better than you do. It established the Abbasids as technologically and culturally superior.
So while he's playing nice with Charlemagne in the West, he's playing absolute hardball with the Byzantines. We mentioned Empress Irene earlier.
Right, she was paying him tribute to keep the peace.
But then she gets deposed.
Exactly. The new emperor is Nicephorus I, and he decides he's going to be the tough guy. He immediately stops the tribute payments, and he writes a letter to Harun that is, it's incredibly insulting.
He demands the money back, doesn't he?
He demands the return of all the tribute Irene had ever paid. He calls her weak, and he basically challenges Harun directly. He says something like, the queen who came before me set you up like a rook and herself like a pawn. Now you pay back everything you took.
And Harun's response is legendary. He doesn't send a diplomat to negotiate. He just flips the emperor's letter over.
And writes his reply on the back.
What did it say?
The text is famous. It starts, in the name of God, the merciful, the compassionate. From Harun, the commander of the faithful, to Nicephorus, the dog of the Romans.
Dog of the Romans, wow. He went straight for the jugular.
Oh, he did. And it continues, I have read your letter, O son of an infidel mother. You shall not hear my reply. You shall behold it.
You shall not hear it. You shall behold it. That is an action movie one-liner.
And he backed it up immediately. He launched a massive invasion into Asia Minor. He sacked the city of Heraclea. He forced Nicephorus to sign a humiliating treaty and pay an even higher tribute than before. It was a demonstration of total, crushing military dominance.
So he's got Charlemagne in the west, he's crushing the Byzantines in the north, and I saw in the notes there's even a Chinese connection.
Yes, the Tang dynasty. The Chinese historical records refer to him as Alun.
And this was an alliance.
It's a strategic alliance aimed against their common rivals, the Tibetans in Central Asia. It just shows you the scope of his vision. He's playing 4D chess on a board that stretches from the Atlantic Ocean all the way to the Great Wall of China.
It's incredible. But I want to pivot now. We've looked at the maps and the armies. Let's go back inside the palace. Because the whole Arabian Nights reputation is all about the harem, the parties, the incredible luxury. Does the reality match the fiction?
In terms of the opulence,
Hmm.
absolutely. The court was incredibly lavish, and the women of the court were major figures, not just in the background.
We have to talk about Zubaida. We mentioned her as the mother of his son Al-Amin, but she was a force of nature in her own right.
Zubaydah bint Jafar. She was a Abbasid royalty on both sides. Her grandfather was Al-Mansur, the man who founded Baghdad. She had impeccable lineage, and she spent money like it was water.
She was a fashion icon, right?
A total trendsetter. The sources say that if Zubaydah wore a jeweled headband one day, the next day every single noblewoman in Baghdad was wearing a jeweled headband. If she decided she liked shoes with gems on the heels, suddenly the entire court needed gem-heeled shoes.
But she wasn't just buying shoes, she was building infrastructure.
Yes, and this is so important. She is famous for the Darba Zubaydah, the Zubaydah Trail. She realized that pilgrims traveling from Iraq to Mecca were literally dying of thirst in the desert.
So she fixed it.
She spent a fortune building a series of wells, reservoirs, and rest stations all along the pilgrimage route. Parts of that system are actually still visible today. It was philanthropy on a massive imperial scale.
But she wasn't the only woman in Harun's life. I mean, the harem was extensive.
It was. And this is important politically, as we'll see later. Harun had many concubines, often from very different backgrounds. His favorite was a woman named Merida, who was Sogdian from Central Asia. She was the mother of a future caliph, Al-Mutasim.
And the singers, I was reading about a singer named Dad al-Kal.
Ah, yes. The story is that Harun bought her for 70,000 gold dinars.
Hold on, wait a minute. Earlier you said the price of a war horse after his campaign crashed to 1 dinar.
That's right.
So he paid the equivalent of 70,000 war horses for one singer.
It's a staggering sum. I mean, it shows the immense concentration of wealth inside that palace. But it also shows how much he valued art and music. He wasn't just hoarding gold, he was a true connoisseur.
There's a more personal story in the notes, a more touching one, about a concubine named Hailana.
This is a lovely story. Ailana was actually a slave girl who belonged to Yahya the Barmakid. Harun saw her when he was younger, before he was caliph, and fell completely head over heels in love with her. He actually begged Yahya for her.
The prince begging his tutor for a girl.
Exactly. And Yahya gave her to him. But she died young, just 3 years later. And the sources say Harun was absolutely devastated. He mourned her deeply. He wrote poetry about her. It's a reminder that behind the King of Kings persona, he was a man capable of deep affection and grief.
And speaking of his personality, the sources are full of these little anecdotes about him just hanging out.
He loved music and poetry, and he had a real sense of humor. Al-Masudi tells a story about a horse race at Raqqa. Harun entered his own prize horse against a horse owned by his son, Al-Ma'mun.
A little father-son rivalry.
Right, and Harun's horse won. And the chronicles describe him just jumping up and down with joy, wiping the sweat off the horse's face with his own sleeve. He wasn't celebrating a military victory. He was just a dad who was happy that his horse was faster than his son's.
I love the story about the poet Miskin. Can you tell that one?
Sure. So Harun asks this poet, Miskin, to sing a song. Miskin performs it, and it's fine. But then, instead of just taking his applause, Miskin launches into this long, winding, boring story about how difficult it was for him to learn the song, the trouble he went through, the people he had to talk to, just droning on and on.
We all know that guy.
We all know that guy. And Harun just starts cracking up. He gives him a reward and says, the story of you learning the song was actually more entertaining than the song itself. He just appreciated the absurdity of it.
But even in these casual moments, there was always a barrier, wasn't there?
The curtain. Yes. Protocol was incredibly strict. When he sat in formal court, he sat behind a curtain. You couldn't see him directly. You couldn't speak until you were spoken to. It was all designed to create this aura of the unseen, almost divine power.
Which brings us to the supernatural. The Arabian Nights is full of magic. Did Harun himself believe in it?
It seems he did. There's a very strange anecdote about a supernatural lute player. Harun is in his court, listening to music, maybe dozing off, and suddenly a mysterious, beautiful young man appears in the room out of nowhere.
A break-in.
Well, the man snatches the lute from the court musician, plays a melody that is so moving it makes everyone in the room weep, and then, just as suddenly, vanishes into thin air.
A ghost musician?
Harun wakes up and decides it was a supernatural visitation, maybe a jinn or an angel. He doesn't investigate it as a security breach, he accepts it as a spiritual event. It shows you that the boundary between the real world and the magical world was maybe a bit thinner back then.
But eventually, reality always comes crashing back in. And for Harun, the crash came in the form of the succession. We call this his fatal mistake in the outline.
It was the mistake that undid pretty much everything else.
He had two main heirs, Al-Amin and Al-Ma'mun. Let's break down the difference between them, because it's not just about who is older.
No, it's about identity. It's about the soul of the empire. Al-Amin was the son of Zubaydah. He had pure Abbasid, pure Arab blood on both sides. He was the darling of the Arab aristocracy in Baghdad. He represented the status quo.
And Al-Ma'mun.
Ma'mun was actually the older brother, but his mother was a Persian concubine. So the Arab purists in the court viewed him with a lot of suspicion. But the Persian and Iranian elements of the empire, who were, the backbone of the entire administration, they loved him.
So the royal family itself is split along the exact same ethnic and political fault lines as the empire.
Exactly. And Harun had a choice. Pick the Arab son and anger the powerful Persian elites, or pick the half-Persian son and anger the Arab establishment in his own capital.
Or try to please everyone.
Which, as we know, never, ever works. He created a compromise. He's known as the Meccan documents. He actually had the succession agreement written down and hung on the walls of the Kaaba in Mecca to make it sacred and unbreakable.
So what was the deal?
He split the power. Al-Amin would be the Caliph in Baghdad, the main title, the figurehead. But Al-Ma'mun was named the heir apparent, and he was given the governorship of Khorasan, a massive eastern province, with almost total autonomy.
So he had his own army.
His own army, his own treasury, everything. Harun effectively split the empire in two. He gave the title to one son and the real military and financial power to the other.
It was a recipe for civil war. He built a ticking time bomb and placed it right on his own throne.
And the bomb started ticking even before he died. The last years of his reign weren't a big party.
No,
they were grueling. The empire was just so big it was starting to fray at the edges. There were revolts in Egypt and Yemen and Syria. And then a major rebellion broke out in Khorasan, led by a man named Rafi ibn Alayf.
And Harun, true to his warrior character, decides he can't delegate this one.
He was a fighter to the very end. He was sick at this point. The sources say he had a severe abdominal illness, maybe cancer or a very severe infection. But he refused to stay in bed. He marshaled the army and he marched east. He was going to crush this rebellion himself.
But he never made it to the rebels.
He never did. He made it as far as Tus, in the Khorasan region of modern Iran. He stopped at a little village called Sanabad. He knew the end was coming. He died there in March of 809.
And he was buried in the garden of the governor's palace, which is a really interesting location today.
It is. That exact spot eventually became the city of Mashhad, which means the place of martyrdom. It's a major pilgrimage site for Shia Muslims because the Imam al-Rida was buried there later. But Harun is there too, buried far from Baghdad, the city he made so famous.
And when he died, she left behind a staggering amount of money.
The numbers are just hard to comprehend. Al-Tabari reports that the state treasury contained 900 million odd dirhams.
900 million.
Plus huge amounts of gold bullion. It was arguably the single wealthiest treasury on the planet at that moment in time.
So he leaves behind a mountain of cash and a political disaster waiting to happen. What happened next?
The disaster unfolded almost immediately. The Meccan documents that were supposed to be sacred, they failed. Amin and Ma'mun went to war. And it wasn't just a skirmish, it was a brutal, grinding civil war that we now call the Fourth Fitna.
And Baghdad, the glorious capital.
Baghdad paid the price. Ma'mun's armies besieged the city for over a year. The round city that Harun had ruled from was bombarded with catapults. Palaces were burned, neighborhoods destroyed. The unity of the empire was just shattered.
So the Golden Age was also the beginning of the end.
In a political sense, yes. Ma'mun eventually won, and the intellectual Golden Age actually continued. Science and philosophy thrived under him. But the political unity of the caliphate never really recovered. That central control that Harun had, it was gone forever.
It's a fascinating paradox, isn't it? The man who is remembered for these beautiful fairy tales is the man whose death kicked off an absolute nightmare.
History is rarely as simple as the stories we tell about it. Harun al-Rashid represents the peak. The historian al-Masudi calls his reign the honeymoon. It was perfect, it was beautiful, and it was fleeting.
And yet he lives on. We have to touch on his legacy in pop culture.
Oh, he's everywhere. Obviously, 1001 Nights keeps him alive in the imagination of millions of children and adults. But he's also in serious Western literature. James Joyce mentions him in Ulysses. Longfellow wrote a poem about him.
And gamers know him.
Absolutely. If you play the game Civilization V, Harun al-Rashid is the leader of the Arabian civilization. He is the default archetype of the wealthy, cultured, powerful Eastern king.
It's amazing how the myth has so completely overtaken the man, but I think after this deep dive, the man is actually way more interesting.
I completely agree. The myth is about magic. The reality is about the limits of power. You can have 20,000 mules loaded with gold. You can have elephants and magical water clocks. You can humble the Roman emperor. But you can still fail to secure a peaceful future for your own family.
That is a very sobering thought. We're going to leave Harun in his tomb in Tus and his treasury in the history books. Thanks for guiding us through this labyrinth.
Always a pleasure.
And for you listening, here is a final thought to chew on as you go about your day. We tend to look back at these golden ages as these static, perfect times, but looking at Harun's reign, you have to ask, was the gold just a thin plating that was covering up some really deep cracks? And here's the big what if Harun had just ignored the politics of lineage and just chosen one son, the most capable son, regardless of whether his mother was Arab or Persian? Would the Islamic Golden Age have looked completely different? Or was the empire simply too big, too complex for any one man to hold together forever? Let us know what you think. Until next time.